We talked about Dallas going down to San Francisco, but there was another big game, and it was, I believe, let's see, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Kansas City. So this was the only upset, at least according to the point spreads, of the weekend. Obviously, two very evenly matched teams, we thought. But Buffalo really put it on the Bills, Rob. And now,
you mean Cincinnati put it on the Bills?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Cincinnati put it on the Bills. The score was 27-10, and at times it didn't even feel that close.
It really didn't, Chris.
It was. I mean, Rob, every time Cincinnati touched the ball, it looked like they were getting 10 to 12 yards. They just ran all over the Bills. And I know you got something to say about Buffalo.
Chris, I love buffalo wings. I love it with the sauce. And they're
they
famous.
Did originate in Buffalo,
yes,
right?
They did. Yes, they did. Buffalo wings are some of the best things you could ever eat. But the Buffalo Bills are frauds. Chris with a capital F. This is the same team that started the season scoring 72 points. They demolished the defending champion Rams. You remember that in L.A.?
Yep.
And then dropped like a 45-piece the next game.
41 on Tennessee.
41 on Tennessee that also made the playoffs. And here we are. They're at home again.
Tennessee didn't make. They came. You mean last year?
Last year, right? I was coming off of last year.
And was in the hunt this year until the last game. Yeah.
Right. Chris, they weren't supposed to be here. Let's just be honest. They were supposed to be going to the AFC Championship with a chance to win a Super Bowl. That's all we talked about with Buffalo. And they got off to a start that we were like, who's going to stop them? You remember that talk?
No,
you can't stop them. They got all the weapons. Josh Allen is a machine, is a monster. And they got 10 points at home in the snow with a leaky offensive line by the Bengals? How?
Supposed to be leaky because they didn't make it leak.
Exactly. And, Chris, we already know the history of the Buffalo Bills with Marv Levy as coach, and they went to 4 straight Super Bowls, and they lost all 4. The first one, if you remember, the Giants won on a missed field goal.
Right.
By Scott Norwood, right? A missed field goal. And then the other ones, if I remember, they got blown out. Like, they were, like, bad. But they went to 4 straight Super Bowls, and they have nothing to show for it. And here we go, Buffalo Bills 2.0. Ain't no way you could just act like nothing had happened and let's just bring the same. Let's get the band back together, Chris, for next year. We'll be good. Ain't no way you could look at that team and think that. Something is stinky in the kitchen. I don't know if a mouse is caught behind the stove or something. Something is stinky. And I'm not eating those wings from Buffalo.
Well, Rob, some of the before I get to my point, the 90s, 93, this was their last one they got to. They lost 30-13 to Dallas. The year before that, they lost 52-17 to Dallas. And the year before that, 37-24 to Washington.
Right. And the one they lost was what?
They lost to
16-13?
20-19.
20-19. Yeah. Scott Norwood missed a makeable field goal, Chris. You know, I watched that game. You want to know where I watched it? I was in the hotel in Oakland, California on a Knicks road trip. And John Cirillo, the PR guy, former for the Knicks, Mr. C, had all the writers, had a big TV, wings, food, Chris, or whatever for us to watch the game. Wow. And we watched it in a hotel in Oakland.
Yeah, I remember that. Rob, a disappointing season for Buffalo. I mean, regular season was great, 13-3, but disappointing way it ended. And I think, Rob, they're going to have to look in the mirror and say, man, we got beat up. They got beat up. That's what stunned me. I mean, we know how good Burrow is. We know their receiving core. But Cincinnati was not supposed to dominate Buffalo.
Right. They could
at
beat
the
them,
line of
Chris.
scrimmage
Right?
like that.
Like you could win that game and you'd be like, man, Cincinnati. No, they dominated.
Right. And Rob, at the line, that's where it was one. Look, Burrow outplayed Allen. Allen was not great. I don't think he was horrible. He just didn't do much. He didn't produce. He wasn't special, and they needed him to be special. But the game, to me, was won in two places. One was on the line of scrimmage. Rob, Cincinnati's not a top run game. They ran for 172 yards. 172 yards. Buffalo ran for 63. It's hard to win a football game when there's that type of rushing disparity. So, and then Josh Allen, Rob, was pressured 17 times. Joe Burrow was pressured 8 times. So Allen was pressured twice as much. So that's the first place the game was lost, at the line of scrimmage, which obviously dictates so many outcomes. And then the second place, Rob, and I like Sean McDermott. He's gotten them, Rob, they hadn't been to the playoffs in almost 20 years when he went there. And they've been there 5 of the last 6 years. But Rob, he was outcoached severely. And he and his staff yesterday. I mean, they couldn't solve Cincinnati's pass rush, whether it was blitzes or whatever. They couldn't solve it. And then on the other side of the ball, Cincinnati, Rob, the first touchdown, Jamar Chase, there was nobody within 15 yards of him when he caught the ball. And he ran it into the end zone. And then Hayden Hurst wide open for the second touchdown. And that was really the game. Because Buffalo only scored 10 points. So 14 was all they needed, but they were wide open. Buffalo did not look prepared. And like I said, I think Sean McDermott's a good coach, Rob, but yesterday has to scare you.
Chris, sometimes, and you're right, he is a good coach. But some coaches just might not be able to get you to where you want to go. And sometimes you have to, it's a hard pill to swallow. And you go, you know what? This guy's good, but he ain't good enough.
Right. Remember Marty Schottenheimer?
Yes. Marty Schottenheimer used to win 12, 13 games every year, Chris.
Yep.
And he got fired after winning 14 games in a season. That because they lost in the playoffs. And it was like, we've seen this movie. Marty Schottenheimer can't win you the big game.
Yep.
And at some point, I mean, look at Andy Reid's record, Chris. He got fired in Philadelphia. Went to the NFC Championship game 4 years in a row.
Yep.
Went to the Super Bowl. Couldn't win. Thank you, Andy Reid. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Yep.
Andy Reid's record in Philly, Chris, is better than McDermott. And he got fired. Right. After a while, you have to look and say, and then, of course, Philly won a championship.
Right. And who knows?
And might win another one. I'll get to the final. I'll get to the championship.
Yep. Nah, you're right. It's a tough one. I tell you what, and I know we talked about this guy last week being overrated, and he is, because he's rated so highly. He's overrated. It
doesn't mean that we think he's a bum.
Right.
That's not what we said.
And Rob, I might put a call in to Sean Payton if I'm Buffalo. I'm serious. Because you don't know when. I mean, I think, with the Mahomes, with an Allen, with the Burrow, I think guys like that, obviously it was true with Rodgers, Brady, and these guys. Your window is your prime, I believe. So
right.
I think even though Rodgers hadn't won a Super Bowl or even been to one in a decade, they're a contender every year.
Right.
This year obviously was different, but the window during his prime was always open. And I think that's what they have to look at at Buffalo and say, look, our window is with Josh, but is McDermott the guy to get us there? At the very least, Rob, I think they need an offensive coordinator. I wasn't impressed with Ken Dorsey this year.
You know what? Chris, I know they struggled. There were some points where, and they did that the year before too, where they struggled offensively.
Right.
But they did put up some big points early on. And I don't know, excuse me, is it the offensive coordinator? Is it him? Or was it Josh Allen? Was it that the players didn't,
Allen does need, and some of this could be Chris, on the QB coach too.
But the turnovers hurt you as well. I mean, right. I'm just saying in general, if you're the offensive coordinator, whatever plays you call, the guy's throwing the ball to the other team or fumbling the ball, right?
Right. And I think too, Rob, like some of those third and shorts, and he's throwing deep. I mean, it's great if it works, but if it doesn't work, now you're facing 4th and 2 or 4th and 4. You know what I mean? And that's tough. So I just think like what Burrow, take your pick, Burrow, Allen, whatever. Allen wins with his physical tools and gifts. Burrow wins with his mind, his savvy, his, poise, making the right decisions. And Rob, Brady won with that. Montana won with that. Like, they got to get somebody, whether it's a QB coach or an offensive coordinator. And I'm sure they're telling Josh this, but somebody's got to get it through his head that he's got to become a better decision maker.
Right. Because all of your talent and all of the other stuff you have, Chris, goes out the window and can be neutralized if you turn the ball over too much.
Right.
It just, you could be one of the best players out there, but if you're going to keep giving up the ball, as you see, and I'm not putting Dak in his class, but that deflates you. It kills you. Like that you can lose a lot of ways. Can't give up the ball like that. You just can't do it. It's hard to win.
They did have some injuries. Micah Hyde was out. Tre'Davious White, he never seemed to get back Tre'Davious White to himself. I don't think he played very well this year when he did come back. Obviously, Von Miller, Rob, that was that's one of the major reasons I picked him to win the Super Bowl. Because, and then he gets hurt midway through the season.
No, that hurt. There's no doubt.
So they have some injuries, but those were on the defensive side. They still only scored 10 points offensively. So,
10 points at home, Chris, in the snow.
Yeah. They got some soul searching to do, and they got to make some moves, and we'll see. But it's like Baltimore. Yeah, they've fallen short. But as long as you got Lamar playing well, you're a contender. And they were. And I think it's the same thing with Buffalo. But if they want to get over that hump, they got to make some moves. All right.